Week 10 is officially in the books. The Raiders' bye week is officially over. We'll put a bow on the bye week as the Raiders start to turn the page and get ready for the Miami Dolphins in South Beach Week 11 action. That plus more on Tuesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for November 12th, 2024.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day, whether you're checking us out wherever you find your favorite podcast or if you're checking us out on YouTube. You know we appreciate that. The show continues to grow each and every day, and that's because of your support, Raider Nation, and because of the job that my man Ari does behind the scenes. If you're checking us out on YouTube, he does a fantastic job. We definitely appreciate him. If it wasn't for him, we would have no Locked On Raider podcast YouTube page. So shout out to my man Ari. You can find him on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. And of course, we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. As a matter of fact, we'll close out the show with your calls and texts. And please believe we got plenty of feedback throughout the course of the bye week. And now that it's officially over and the Silver and Black start to turn their attention to the Miami Dolphins, who picked up a victory on Monday Night Football, we continue to get plenty of feedback. So we'll have that coming up, segment number 3 of today's show. Segment number 2, there was a report from CBS Sports. Jonathan Jones and Amy Trask and company did a really good job talking about a meeting that the Raiders had as a team and an organization over the course of the bye week that honestly was a little bit disturbing, especially for all the experience that the Raiders have on their coaching staff. So we'll hear what the report was, we'll hear what the meeting was all about, and talk about it. That'll come up in segment number 2. Here in segment number 1, just news and notes of the day, as I always do. We'll go ahead and jump right into it after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is the Ultimate GM. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. It's all caps inside the game store to receive a free boost to your franchise. I'll tell you a lot more about the Ultimate GM following segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. But as I said off top, that it is official. Week 10 is done. It's wild that we wait and we wait and we wait and we talk about football so long and can't wait to get to the regular season, and all of a sudden just boom, flies by just like that. We are past the halfway part. Week 10 is officially in the books. The Miami Dolphins picked up a 23-15 victory over the LA Rams on Monday Night Football, a game that I was paying attention to because, well, every single game that happens for the most part in the AFC, especially for some of these teams that aren't doing so well, just like the Raiders, has an impact on the Silver and Black. So just wanted to update real quick the draft order. This is as of today. Tankathon.com/NFL. If you want to go look, I had a couple people push back and say that Q, you're wrong. Q, you're wrong. Look, people will tweet out like screenshots of the order, but they don't do it when the games are over. Like there was one graphic that was floating around talking about the Tennessee Titans being a 2-6 team. They're not. They're 2-7. So you always got to keep it updated. These things move very quickly. That's why I was paying attention to Monday Night Football for multiple reasons, but just to see what happens. So right now, the top 5 stay the same based off the victory by the Dolphins. So the Jaguars are number 1 overall pick. Giants are number 2. Titans are number 3. Browns are number 4. The Raiders are number 5. Now at number 6, instead of the Dolphins, it's the Patriots at 3-7, Saints at 3-7 following them, the Jets at 3-7 after them, the Carolina Panthers at 3-7 right there. They're at number 9, and the Miami Dolphins, after that victory on Monday Night Football, dropped to the 10 spot at 3-6, and the Dallas Cowboys are sitting there at number 11. And, of course, that could be affected this upcoming Sunday as the Raiders take on the Miami Dolphins in South Beach for Week 11 action. But I did want to just go ahead and update you on that. I had a listener hit me up by way of Twitter, listener John at Lost, INYOMI on Twitter, and said, Q, this draft is going to be the same as the last. The quarterback we want will go before we pick. The worst mistake would be to reach for a quarterback that we know isn't going to be the guy. Instead, do the same as we did last year. Go best player available. I prefer going after Darnold and Aiden O'Connell as a backup. And I said that I think that Tom Telesco and company has already proven that they're not going to reach. If they were going to reach for a guy just to say that they got a guy, that's what they would have done in 2024 in the draft. They let all those quarterbacks go before they were able to pick at number 13, where they went and got Brock Bowers. And what Tom Telesco said is the quarterbacks that were available when it was our time to pick were no better than who we had. So we weren't just going to go out and get a guy just to get a guy, which I think is a great approach. You don't want to just get a guy and say, okay, well, we went and drafted a guy. You've got to get the right guy. Now, as I've mentioned multiple times, going out and getting a quarterback this upcoming offseason, preferably one in the draft, is number one job for Tom Telesco. And I do believe the Raiders are going to exhaust every different way and opportunity they get to go get their guy, but they're not going to go just grab a guy just to grab a guy. And look, Sam Darnold, I know he's kind of the bell. He's like he's the what's the saying? Say the bell of the ball. I guess he's the bell of the ball right now because he's kind of found a resurgence in Minnesota. But let's all be honest about the situation. It's still a Band-Aid, right? It's still putting masking tape on the situation. It's still putting lipstick on the pig. He's not a guy that's going to be a long-term solution at the quarterback position. We already saw what it was with Gardner Minshew, who, yes, he was right there on the verge of getting the Colts into the playoffs. We saw what that is. Aiden O'Connell, I think we all can agree that he's probably a really good backup. I know there's a few out there right now that believe that if he had started the season, the Raiders would be in a lot better position. I don't subscribe to that. Maybe you do, and that's fine. I respect that. But I think we all know who Aiden O'Connell is. So I think that Tom Telesco has already proven what he won't do, which is reach, which is a good thing, right? He'll let the board fall to him, and he won't make any kind of drastic move just for the sake of going and saying, hey, we went and got a quarterback. But I do want to update you on that, and obviously as games continue to get played, I'll continue to update you. Again, tankathon.com/NFL will give you up to the date, up to the minute order as far as the draft goes. As soon as games get wrapped up, boom, it hits it that fast. So just go ahead and make sure if you're trying to check it out, that's where you go. Also, for the bye week, just kind of putting a bow on what the Raiders did in Week 10 while they were off. They made a bunch of changes. Scott Turner is officially the interim OC and the play caller. Joe Philbin, longtime coach in the league, is the interim offensive line coach. And Norv Turner is now the senior advisor. The one thing that they did not announce, and maybe we'll find out on Wednesday when we meet with Antonio Pierce, we haven't actually heard when we're going to meet with AP. I'm just assuming because we didn't meet with him on Monday. We're not going to meet with him today on Tuesday. I'm assuming that we'll meet with him on Wednesday, get back on schedule, the Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule. Starting quarterback. The starting quarterback has not been named yet. My gut feeling tells me Desmond Ridder is going to get named as a starting quarterback coming out of the bye week. But again, nothing is official until AP says it's official. So we'll find out sooner rather than later. That'll be one of the big questions that we ask. I think that we'll talk to him on Wednesday. But when I find out officially, of course, I'll pass that along. But when it comes to AP, when it comes to asking him questions, I'm sure there's plenty of questions that will be asked to him about this report from CBS Sports about a big meeting that the Raiders had, players, coaches, all of the above. And, well, it wasn't glowing reviews by the players. I'm sure he'll be asked about that CBS report. We're actually going to hear about that report, and we'll talk about it coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about a couple great sponsors here on the Locked On Raiders podcast, including Ultimate Pro Football GM. All Raider fans, remember our great partner at Ultimate Pro Football GM. They are back, and they've had an amazing new game mode. They've added it that I got to tell you about. The game that has you step into the shoes of a football franchise GM and lead it to glory now has a head coach career mode. How cool is that? On top of getting to build your dynasty by drafting players, signing free agents, and hiring coaching staff, you can also get to call offensive plays during games as well. Additionally, you'll dig the new tools you can work with, such as individual training camps, upgraded negotiation system. So it's basically a fun and realistic game, but it got a whole lot better. If you already have it installed, all you got to do is do an update so you can try out the new mode. If you don't have it yet, fine. Download it right now. It's a must-have for all football fans. I know that you're going to love it. Ultimate Pro Football GM is completely free, has no ads, and 100% playable offline. You can play on the go as you want and when you want to. And here's a special offer right now for all Locked On Raider podcast listeners. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. It's all one word, all caps, inside the game store, and you'll receive a free boost to your franchise. Make sure to get it, as this perk will jumpstart your play and give you the advantage you'll want in creating a dynasty. All you got to do is download the game. Go to ultimate-gm.com. That's ultimate-gm.com, or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate Pro Football GM. Start your dynasty today. I also want to tell you about our great friends at FanDuel. And I know that it's 10 weeks that are already in the books. I get that. But you still got at least 8 more weeks and 7 more games for most of the teams across the league, right? America's number one sports book is FanDuel. And right now, new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, and it's all in one place. So if you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com to join today. Again, you're going to get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more of FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to jump into a report that I saw over the weekend from Jonathan Jones from CBS Sports. NFL Insider has been doing his thing for a really long time. Last time I caught up with Jonathan was in Costa Mesa, California at Raiders training camp. He was doing kind of a tour, right? He was going from one camp to the other, and he stepped in and hung out for a little while at a Raiders camp, got to chop it up with him for a little while. Of course, Amy Trask, the Princess of Darkness, she works for CBS Sports as well. So Jonathan is talking about, in this piece that you're going to hear right now, talking about a meeting that the Raiders have and some of the grievances that the players had over the bye week, and brings Amy Trask into it. She provides her, 2 cents on it and her kind of knowledge of the situation, especially with her history with the Silver and Black. But I found this to be really intriguing and, to be 100% honest, a little disturbing at the same time. Here's Jonathan Jones from CBS Sports.
Amy, want to get your thoughts. The Raiders made some changes this past week, firing offensive coordinator Luke Getsy and 2 other offensive staff members after their loss to the Bengals on Sunday. In the coming days, head coach Antonio Pierce would elevate Scott Turner to interim OC, make senior advisor Joe Philbin the offensive line coach, and bring longtime NFL coach Norv Turner in as an offensive advisor. Norv, of course, the father of Scott. But that is not all. On Monday afternoon, there was a players and staff meeting, and in it, Kyle, in it, players spoke up. They talked about needing a more efficient schedule, that there was too much time being wasted, that there needed to be more structure, more discipline, more accountability within the entire program. Now, the Raiders are on a bye this week, but the hope is these changes from that vent session will help the 2-win Raiders have a strong back half of the season, just like last year, Amy.
Well, I certainly hope that's the case and that there will be a strong surge after the bye. But something you said puzzled me, JJ. Wasted time, lack of accountability, need for discipline and structure. And here's why it puzzles me. Yes, Antonio Pierce is in his first year as a head coach, but he has on staff Marvin Lewis, Joe Philbin, Rob Ryan, men with a lot of experience. And beyond that, the head trainer and the equipment manager have both been with the Raider organization for roughly 43, 44 years. And the reason I note that is, in my experience, the trainer and the equipment manager have a real sense of the pulse of what's going on with the team. They are with the players every day. They spend a lot of time. They hear player discussions. So the question I have is, did they sense there were problems? If not, that's a little odd. If they did sense there were problems and didn't share those with the head coach and the general manager, that's a little odd. So something about this puzzles me. That said, I'm hoping for a surge. I want the best for Raider fans.
He's there talking about the players' complaints, more efficient schedule, time being wasted, discipline, the team needing more discipline, more structure and accountability. And look, I get it. When things are going bad and you're losing games, you're 2-7, there's a lot of questions that are going to be asked. There's going to be a lot of fingers that are going to be pointed. There's going to be a lot of, we need this, we need that, we need this, we need that. But I'll tell you, Raider Nation, as I was listening to this, and I had to listen to it about, I'd say 3 or 4 times, it really blew my mind that there's this many questions and this many complaints from the players. Like, when Josh McDaniels was with the team and the players had a lot of complaints, I got it. I understood. Practice was really long. It was really tedious. There was times that, Coach McDaniels was really going in on the players and, just didn't make the environment feel very comfortable. It felt like one of those situations where guys were at, on edge and a little uneasy. And sometimes that's good. Sometimes it's good to get a little uncomfortable. But Antonio Pierce was the guy that multiple players pounded the table from Max Crosby to obviously Devontae Adams. I know he's not with the team anymore, but other guys wanted to have AP there. I know Jack Jones at the end of the season wanted AP there. Nate Hobbs wanted AP there. Meek Robertson, who's no longer with the team, wanted AP there. So many did. Josh Jacobs, who's no longer with the team, wanted AP there. So many different guys that I talked to personally all endorsed Antonio Pierce. And of course, we heard what Max Crosby had to say, and Max's voice probably speaks louder than anyone within that locker room. But it just kind of blows my mind that when you have coaches like Marvin Lewis, when you have coaches like Joe Philbin, when you have coaches that have been there, done that, like Rob Ryan, you have guys like Patrick Graham who've been on the staff for a really long time and been coaches in the league for a really long time, that there's going to be questions about a more efficient schedule. There's too much time being wasted, not enough discipline. Need more structure and accountability. Like under Antonio Pierce, this is one of the things I was excited about, And I said it as he was an interim coach. And anyone who's listened to me for a long time knows I never sign off on hiring the interim coach. But I 100% believe in Antonio Pierce. I 100% believe he was the right guy for the job, right? And I said that early on. I'm not trying to back off of that now. But one of the things that I liked about it was the fact that he did hold the players accountable. He did have a sense of discipline. Was it exactly the same as Josh McDaniels? No, but as a former player, he kind of knew what buttons to push, when to push the buttons, how to get the most out of the guys, how to ease off a little bit, kind of knows what the players are looking for. And so when I start hearing about these are the kind of reports, and again, I know Antonio Pierce is going to be asked about it coming up on Wednesday when we get a chance to meet with him, even if I have to ask him about it, just, hey, what did you think of the report or what happened in that meeting? Was it a good meeting with the team? Do you think that, you could push forward the next 8 games of the season? Those are very valid questions to be asked. It just blows my mind. And there's been multiple times on the show that I've talked about what's blowing my mind this season under Antonio Pierce. Again, just what I expected to see and what we've seen and what we've heard now is completely different, right? And I really felt like there was going to be the really good discipline, which goes back to, the no penalties that the Raiders were committing. They were the least penalized team in the league, which was so rare to hear from a Raiders team. And then all of a sudden we see during the regular season how all of a sudden they got loose and got squirrely and had all these penalties. And I kept saying, that's not what AP was preaching. And I've asked him about that multiple times. And so I just find it hard to believe that the structure is so bad. When we were in Costa Mesa, California, and we saw their training camp and the way that every single day went, it was like there was no wasted time. It was like boom, 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 right? One setup to another setup, one field to another field. There was multiple fields that they had in play there in Costa Mesa. They had 3 fields, and it was just like boom, 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 boom. They just kept rolling. There was never a time where it just seemed like it was a bunch of downtime and that they were wasting time. Even to the point, I brought this up back in not even training camp. It was back in, mandatory mini camp, OTAs, rookie mini camp, when they had that big video board on the practice field. And the reason why, and I asked AP about that as well, and I asked Patrick Graham about that, the reason why they had that big video board on the practice field was so they didn't waste time. So literally in practice, they can go from taking a break during practice, run over to the side, get a drink, get a icy or whatever the case may be, and watch what they just did in real time. So they're processing it so they don't have to go back inside the facility and then go to the meeting room and then watch a lot of film and just drag the day out, because that's what the players don't want. They don't want a real long day. They want to get in, know what they have to do, have a certain structure in place, boom, 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 get it done. Obviously, there's some like Max Crosby that are going to be there a lot longer than that. There's guys like Robert Spillane that are going to be there a lot longer than that. But for the most part, these guys want to know exactly what they're obligated to, what they have to get done, and they want their time used efficiently. So it really surprises me that this is where they're at, especially with all the different coaches that are on the staff. And I know that there's a lot of young coaches on the staff as well. But when you have guys that have been there, done that for a very long time in the league, like a Marvin Lewis, like a Joe Philbin and a Rob Ryan, those things should not be happening. And I was excited about those guys being on the staff because I thought that's what AP could lean on. And I remember the one thing that did kind of, I don't want to say blow my mind, but caught my attention when we talked to Marvin Lewis. I don't remember who asked him the question about, well, exactly what is your role? It might have been Vinny Bonsignore. It might have been Adam Hill. It might have been other. But that's just kind of who stands out to me. What exactly is your role? When are you going to speak up? When are you asked to speak up? And he said, whatever I'm asked, if someone, speaks to me and needs to know my input, I'll give it to him. And to me, I felt like that he needed to provide more input than that. I feel like him being a guy that's been a long-time coach in the NFL, a guy that was in the Bengals organization that had really bad structure, really bad culture, and he had to go in there and turn things around, even though he never went and made some deep run into the playoffs. Where they were when he arrived in Cincinnati to where they were when he left was like night and day, right? And he might not ever get as much credit as he should, but I felt like he should step up and say, hey, AP, this is what we need to do. Hey, this is the kind of structure we need to have. This is how we need to maximize the player's time. Like, if he's the assistant head coach, be the assistant head coach. Don't be a guy that's just standing around and waiting for someone to speak to you and say, hey, Marvin, what do you think about this? Sometimes you just have to step up. Sometimes you have to step up and you have to speak. And that's what I expected for him. That's what I expected from Joe Philbin and what I expected from Rob Ryan. And look, I'm not there to see practice. We're only allowed a very small window. It's only the stretching process. Then we have to go. Training camp is obviously different. We could be there for the whole practice. But so I don't really know exactly what he's doing, but I'm just basing it off the reports that we're hearing. So it's pretty disturbing. And if that continues, with Mark Davis being a guy who's very much a player's owner, where he listens to the input of the players, especially guys like Max Crosby, that could go a long way in determining what's going to happen after this season with everybody. It really could. If the players go back to MD and say, hey, you know what? This wasn't right. Our time wasn't being maximized. We didn't have any structure. Our discipline wasn't in place. There's no accountability. If all that gets back to MD, which clearly I'm sure he knows all about this past meeting, and players start complaining, then all bets are off. You cannot, you just, who knows what can happen. Last time they had that big meeting, and obviously it was way bigger than this past meeting, but the last time they had that when Josh McDaniels was the head coach, the next day he was fired, right? And I'm not saying the AP is going to get fired, but he's got to prove over the course of the next 8 games, starting with this Miami game coming up to South Beach on Sunday, that the structure is correct, the culture is right, the players' time is being maximized, like all those things. Discipline is in place, accountability, and you've got to be able to see it on the field. He's got to prove that all that's in place. There very easily could be too many coaches on his staff. He may need to trim some of the fat, and he may have to decide and sit down with some folks and decide where the fat is, right? I can't sit there and tell you who it is because, again, I'm not sitting there watching all practice long, and I'm not in the meetings rooms. I'm not in the, the facility and going through the game plan. I don't know. But he may have to trim this thing down to be able to get a better structure. Right now, it seems like there's just way too much going on, and it sounds like it could be way too much because there's too many cooks in the kitchen, something we talked about quite a bit on the Locked On Raiders podcast. So pretty disturbing and not a good sign that they're having these kind of meetings. They've had multiple meetings like that so far this season, and they only have 2 wins, right? They've had as many meetings, if not more, of these type of meetings than they've had wins on the season. That's never a glowing review. That's never a good sign for a coach that's trying to hold on to his job and prove that he can handle the job of a head coach in the National Football League. What's on your mind? Your calls and texts are coming up next at 707-654-4693. That's the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. Before we get to that, though, I want to tell you about another great sponsor we have here on the Locked On Raider podcast, and that is Game Time. And basketball is back. Right, whether it's college hoops, NBA hoops, it is back. It's exciting. I'm excited about college hoops because Little Q's playing at Portland State. They're 1-1 so far on the season. They look like they could be a really good team. So if you want to go to a college game, you want to go to an NBA game, or other, right? Maybe it's something else you can go to, and you want to be a part of the excitement, be a part of the environment, just be a part of all the action. Game Time is the way to do it. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. They have priority Game Time picks. They have all-in pricing. They have seat views, the lowest price guarantee, and Game Time ticket coverage. They have so many different options, but that Game Time ticket coverage, your purchase is going to be covered with most flexible customer service policy in the ticket industry. And the lowest price guarantee, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find cheaper tickets. I don't even want to have to tell you about the seat views because people say I say that all the time, but you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy your tickets. So with all that being said, let's take the guesswork out of buying tickets together with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create the account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your time to shine. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's go out to Sacramento, California. Sacktown Mark. He's calling to give his overall thoughts on the team and where it's at right now, and more importantly, the order of operations. Here he is, Sacktown Mark.
Thank you. This is Sacktown Mark. Just kind of wanted to call and talk about why another reason I'm kind of out on the Raiders this year. Obviously, they're not doing anything. So when I say I'm out, it means I mean more so that my spirits are kind of low about the team for the next few years, not just this year. And the reason why is because, in my opinion, they have a problem when it comes to the order of operations within the organization on the football side of things. I think Sandra Douglas Morgan has done a great job on the business side of things, holding it down. But when it comes to the football operations side, in my opinion, it's a mess. Mark Davis has said in the past that he wants the GM and the coach to be in sync and that they're the ones that make the football decisions. But like, it just doesn't make any sense, because if that's the case, then why bring Tom Brady in to like choose the next quarterback? Like, why would you do that? All that does is confuse the place that Tom Telesco and AP have, or whoever's going to be the head coach next year if they get rid of AP, which I doubt they will, but you just never know with this team, obviously. But it just confuses what the role is for Tom Telesco and his capacity to be the true general manager. If like Tom Brady's the guy who's going to tell Telesco who to pick, then it's like, okay, so we have 4 layers of decision makers in this organization. We have Mark Davis at the top of the mountain, and then below him we have Tom Brady, and then below him we have Tom Telesco, and then below him we have AP, and then we have our coordinators. It's just like, I don't know, the most successful teams in the NFL have had maybe 1 or 2 layers of leadership on the football side, and the owners more or less stay out of it. You know, you look at the Patriots, Robert Kraft stays out of the football side, let Belichick do what he wanted to do. In Kansas City, you have Andy Reid. You know, I believe the Hunts they're the owners, and then they have a GM, I forget his name, and then you have Andy Reid, and that's it. That's the order of operations there. But the Raiders have so many layers. I don't know. I'm just thinking about the times I've worked at places where you have to go to like 15 different people to get approvals for things, and it just makes the whole process super bureaucratic and slows everything down, and everyone has to be at all these meetings and all that stuff. You know, it's inefficient. Anyways, that's just my thoughts, and that's why I'm not really feeling too excited for the next few seasons. I hope I'm wrong, of course, but that's all I got to say. And, of course, as always, Q, thank you for all that you do, and go Raiders.
Mark, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you, and really good question, right? It goes back to, honestly, the head coach and GM hiring process, right? What I was told and what was pretty exciting was it felt like the order of operations were going to be correct, right? The GM was going to get hired, and then the GM was going to hire the head coach, right? That's the correct order of operations, regardless. And that's when I believed it was going to be Champ Kelly and then Antonio Pierce. Well, instead, Antonio Pierce gets hired, Champ Kelly doesn't get the GM job, and then Tom Telesco gets hired, and AP is part of that. So AP literally hired his boss, right? And so that's where the structure is not correct. The order of operations is not correct. And now you throw into the mix Tom Brady, right? And we still to this day don't know the exact extent. We've heard rumors. I've asked everyone that's anyone what his role will be. And a lot of people say player personnel. He wants to help put this team together. And, you know, it sounds great in theory, but do we know that he's a great talent evaluator? Right? I bring up the example of Michael Jordan all the time. I believe Michael Jordan's the greatest basketball player to ever play, but he wasn't a very good owner. He didn't put together a very good team. He didn't make very good decisions. He hired bad coaches, drafted bad players, gave contracts to guys that didn't deserve them. Like, he just didn't do things the right way. And I think he's the greatest basketball player of all time. And look, we could argue. There's plenty of different arguments out there. It's fine. It's not taken away from the point. Just because you're a great Hall of Fame, one of the best to ever do it players doesn't mean that you're going to be a great talent evaluator and you can put a team together. It doesn't always mean that. I'm not saying Brady can't, but I'm not saying he can. And I also know that he's a broadcaster right now. So how much is he really focused in on the day-to-day operations of the team? And now that might change once the season's over, but how much is he paying attention to who he'd like to bring into this team right now, right? It's so much that goes into it. So I don't know. So you bring up some really good points. I don't know who's in charge of what. And I hate that I can't give you an answer, but I can't. And I've asked anyone who's anyone to give me an answer on especially on the Brady part. And there's really no answer because nobody really knows. Maybe one day we'll get to talk to Brady himself and he can give us the answer. But as of right now, we don't have any of that. But thanks so much for the call. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Omar in San Antonio. It says, hey, Q. It's Omar from San Antonio again. You read my mind on Monday, mentioning how the Sanders family could Eli Manning Shador to the Raiders. That would be our best option for next year because I don't think we will stay in the top 5 for the draft. We also need an elite left tackle. I think it's time to move on from Colton, and Mumford hasn't shown he can be an option there next year. Maybe tackle in the first and get Dart, Aller, or Dylan Gabriel in the second, or trade late into the first, or vice versa. Just don't think Ward, Sanders, or Milroe will be there when we pick. without trading multiple firsts from them. Finally, Philbin, Lewis, and now Norv Turner. All we need is the found John Gruden. All we need is John Gruden to have fired Football Coaches Association, a real thing. You get what I'm saying. Too many cooks. CBS reported staff issues on the meeting players had, which I assume he went over already today. Thanks for hustling every single day, Q. That's Omar, San Antonio. Thanks for the text. I kind of understand what you're talking about with the John Gruden thing is maybe that's all you need to do is just add him back to the mix as well. Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know how much, Turner and Philbin and all these guys are going to make for the last 8 games of the season, but it kind of is what it is. But the more important part of your text was about the draft. I do think that the Raiders are going to be all in on Shedeur. I really do. I think that the owner, Mark Davis, is a big fan. I think that Dion would have no problem with him going to the Raiders. I think AP would like to have him as the Raiders quarterback, and I think Tom Brady would as well. So, again, don't know the pecking order or who's in charge or not, but I just feel like Shedeur would be able to be that guy. He's my guy. He's the guy that I'm picking, and I know that everyone doesn't like him, and that's fine. Some people don't like him because of his last name. Some people just don't like him because of him, which is fine. It's different strokes for different folks. That's the guy I'm picking. I also like Cam Ward, and I like Jalen Milroe as well. But, all the quarterbacks definitely have some warts to them, but they have room to grow. And I think Shedeur would be the best pro as far as I'm concerned. But, there's that. And you're right when it comes to left tackle. That needs to be addressed. That's why I said the other day about, you need to beef up the offensive line, need to beef up the defensive line as well. But there's definitely a need for another left tackle because I do see the last few days of Colton Miller. So thanks so much for the text. I do appreciate you. Sorry for messing it up at the end. Up next, got a call from Cy Reezy from the Bay. He's calling to talk about the upcoming quarterback draft and where he heard that Shedeur would be ranked in last year's draft. Here he is, Cy Reezy from the Bay.
What up, Q? Cy Reezy from the Bay. All right, it's back. We got game week again, but as you know, the way the season's going, the bigger conversation is going to be about the draft. So anyway, I was just catching up. Heard your podcast this afternoon about the draft class for quarterbacks, and it just so happened that as I was scrolling through my feed, I caught a little YouTube short with Jason Fitz and a couple other guys. I don't know who they were. But basically, they were talking about this draft class coming up in 2025 for the quarterbacks and how it actually ranks and how it compares to the draft class we just had. And the cool part was that basically the panel was saying that, like, if you were to compare Shedeur Sanders to this year's quarterback draft class, they would rank him number 6 behind Bo Nix. And that's kind of crazy to me because, well, one, I guess I already had heard that, the 2025 draft class was going to be a down year for quarterbacks, but just hadn't heard it put in that kind of context before. And it kind of brings up the question. Like, we're talking a lot about how the Raiders could improve their draft position and how they might want to get up high to get a top draft pick so they can go after a quarterback. But is that quarterback really going to be worth that high of a draft pick? And would it actually be better to defer drafting a quarterback to the 2026 season where you have a chance at, like, some truly generational talent, like maybe an Arch Manning? I know there's more than just him out there, but I'm just using that as an example. It kind of does raise that question. Like, if you're going to count on a guy to be the next leader of the franchise, is it worth spending the number 1 draft pick? And let's say, not say they have a number 1, but let's say they have a top 5 pick on a Shedeur Sanders where maybe they could get by another year. Maybe they could find a veteran. Maybe they could defer that decision and just go with the best player available and really go all in. Maybe even stack up their war chest so in 2026 they can get a really high draft pick. Even if they don't have a bad record, maybe they can stockpile some picks and trade up. I don't know. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about that, man. Anyway, that's all I got today. Sorry, I'm out.
Thanks for the call, my man. It's always great to hear from you. And, yeah, look, you can rank the quarterback classes however you want. I understand this past quarterback class, draft class, was supposed to be the end-all, be-all. I get that. But, I mean, the Raiders couldn't get their guy, right? They wanted the number 2 quarterback that was taken, Jaden Daniels. And it's funny, I mean, as much as we're talking about where Shedeur would be ranked in that class, one, it doesn't matter because he didn't come out in that class. Doesn't mean that he's not a really good quarterback. But the best quarterback in that class so far has been the number 2 guy. Matter of fact, the number 1 guy, Caleb Williams, who was the guy that we talked about being the number 1 overall pick for multiple years. He was the sure shot, couldn't miss, and he was going to put the Bears where they need to be. He's been looking like Bryce Young. One thing is he's taller than Bryce Young. He's been looking exactly like Bryce Young looked his rookie year, except for he's taller. Right? So my point is it's a crapshoot. I think Shadour's the guy. I think he's going to be really good based off my eye test, not based off of what everyone's telling me and what I'm hearing about rankings, this, that, and the other, based off what I see every single Saturday when I watch, when I see his body of work, when I see what he's able to do, when I see what he's able to do with in the pocket, when I see what he's able to do with his legs, with his arm, and just having football IQ. That's, to me, all I need to know and all I need to see to feel like the quarterback's going to be really good. And that's all I've ever gone on. Doesn't matter if I'm talking about Bryce Young, if I'm talking about C.J. Stroud, if I'm talking about Jalen Hurts. It doesn't. Whatever quarterback it is, it's always going to be based off the eye test. I'm not going to ever rank them in certain quarterback classes because, I mean, we could do that all day. Shador, Cam Ward, Dylan Gabriel, Jackson Dart, Quinn Ewers, right, Carson Beck. None of those guys came out last year. They're all coming out this year. So every draft class is different. So I'm not going to compare where they'd be ranked in this year's class or that year's class because it doesn't matter. They didn't come out. They'll come out this upcoming year. So we'll see. But, again, I understand your concerns. For my money, Shador's my guy, but we'll see what happens. Got a text from Jason in the 304. Hey, Q. Raider Jason from the 304 coming off the bye week. 1, I'm on the island with you. I was pounding the table for AP. We need continuity at the head coach. Mark Davis should allow him to coach his contract out, then make a decision. 2, I'm not making excuses, but here are some facts. AP and Telesco are dealing with the aftermath of the Gruden-Mayock draft disasters and the McDaniel-Ziegler personnel disasters. 3, I'm not all pumped up about the whole Tom Brady possibly dabbling in the personnel. Didn't we already try to Did we already try that to a certain extent with McDaniels and Ziegler? Is he going to be a broadcaster or an NFL executive? Can't really do both. What do you think, Q? 4, on to Miami, going to South Beach is always a tough game for us. As always, love the show. Thanks for all that you do for Raider Nation. Just win, baby, and go Raiders. And, Jason, thanks so much. Great points that you bring up. Not going to make an excuse. You're dealt the cards, the hand that your cards, whatever that saying is. I don't know. There's a bunch of sayings I can't come up with today. You're dealt the cards that you're dealt the hand that your cards, you're dealt the hand that your card, no. You're dart, I don't know. I don't know what that saying is. Maybe that's why I don't play cards. You deal with the hand. No, you deal with the cards that your hand is. I don't know. I'm going to get like 18 texts that are going to be like, Q, the saying is this, that, and the other. Right. That part. Anyway, you deal with it. You handle it and you roll on. That's all you can really do. Jason, my bad, man. I thought I was coming up with a great creative saying, and not so much. So I just totally messed up the whole thing. But thanks so much for the text. I do appreciate you. We'll close things out with Jordan in Oregon. Hopefully this will go a little bit better. He's calling to talk about Monday's show, the college football references, and also talks about how much of a reset this Raiders team really needs. Here's Jordan in Oregon.
What's going on, Q? Jordan in Oregon. Wanted to call in here, just listen to your Monday podcast. Good stuff. I appreciate the insight into college football side of things. The reality of the situation is I think it's needed to touch base on these up and coming guys coming out of college, and just with where we're sitting now with our record. The point I wanted to call and make is, looking at all 32 teams, I don't think there's a team that's due for a reset more than the Raiders right now. And I'll explain to you, the reason I think that is more than anything is the quarterback situation, the idea that we're going to have a chance of getting this right, and probably putting more equity into that than we have in, decades. Secondly is the idea, that the current team doesn't have an identity and has taken pretty much a step backwards in every category. And so I think it's important, like you've discussed a little bit on your show, Q, of like having that young offensive, maybe, mind that could lead this team going forward. This seems like a good time to pivot to that. If you're going to reset and you're going to go in a different direction, I just think it wouldn't make much sense to bring AP and this staff back. They're still remaining quite a few coaches from even McDaniels, and I just think it's time. Second reason I wanted to call in is watching the two top guys, it seems consensus all over the board, Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders. I just want to point out, I've been doing the same as you, Q, just watching these guys, excited for college playoffs. I'm more excited about college ball than I've been in years, just for the idea of seeing who could potentially come in and save this team, save these Raiders. And I think it definitely has to start with the quarterback. I did want to say, out of both those top two guys, if any of your listeners have time, watch Cam Ward and watch him go through his progressions. I don't know that I've ever seen a more calm guy in the pocket. Like, the guy almost looks like he's standing there with not a worry in the world, and he's always looking to pass first, just like you brought up with Sanders, and use those legs if needed to have that ability to break out of the pocket and make a play. But watch Cam Ward in the pocket. The guy almost looks like you'd think he's going through a walkthrough. He is so calm. It's the craziest thing. I know you probably know what I'm talking about, Q. Maybe you can elaborate on that. But anyway, appreciate all your coverage. Appreciate everything you're doing. Peace out, bro.
Jordan, thanks for the call, my man. Appreciate you. And we'll see what's going on the rest of the way, right? That's what's most important. The Raiders have 8 games to show and prove who they are, right? Coaches, players, everybody. They all, they have something to prove. And I think we'll all know sooner rather than later what kind of a reset, if a reset is needed at all. That's the thing about it. Like, you don't want to continue to press the reset button, because it's just a revolving door that never closes. It never stops. So you hope that that's not what ends up happening. You hope that they find their footing. You hope that, you start to see this team get put together the correct way, and then you move forward from there. But again, we won't know until we actually know. So thanks so much for the call. And, again, like I said, Shedeur is my number one guy. Cam Ward is fantastic. Really good player. Miami only has 1 loss on the season, mainly because of him. He's a really good player. So if the Raiders didn't get Shedeur and they end up with Cam Ward, I don't think that'd be a bad thing. I think both those guys are really good at the top of this 2025 upcoming NFL draft. So thanks so much for that call. I do appreciate you. Let's see. You dealt with the never mind. I was going to try one more time. The cards that you dealt. I don't know. For some reason, I know what it is, but I just don't know what it is. So that's what it is. Hey, man, that was fun. So there you go. That's going to do it for today's show. I'm going to go Google that saying so I know it. I'm going to have it etched in stone in my head now. I'll never be able to forget it, but it doesn't matter for the show right now. So Raider Nation, hopefully you had a great Veterans Day. Again, shout out to all the veterans. Hope you got the proper due. Again, we give you all the respect in the world for everything that you do, and allow guys like me to be knuckleheads and mess up sayings that are probably easy not to mess up, but I mess them up anyway. And it's okay, because of all the sacrifices that you and your families have done, you allow guys like me to do what I do. So we thank you so much here on the Locked On Raiders podcast, and we just thank you in general for all that you do. So until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. More importantly, just win, baby.